Hi everyone, in this video we are going to explore everything you need to know about FLISP, or as it's now known, First Home Finance. Okay, so let's take a look at what FLISP stands for. It stands for Finance Linked Individual Subsidy Program, and it is a subsidy program for a household for housing purposes. So this subsidy can only be used on a residence that you will be living in. You cannot buy commercial space or office space or any other kind of space. You can only buy a housing space, whether that is a stand, a pre-built house, or a house that needs to be repaired and remodeled, as long as it is your primary residence that you will be living in. So let's take a look at what is First Home Finance. This was an initiative that's run by the Department of Human Settlements, and it is to enable sustainable and affordable first-time home ownership to residents of South Africa, born citizens of South Africa who are residing in South Africa. So let's just make it clear that if you are currently living overseas and you'd like to buy an investment property, you will not qualify for FLISP. FLISP is for the house that you are going to live in. Okay, so within this income bracket of 3,501 to 22,000 Rand per month, please note that is gross income. And the market of the people who fall within this income bracket, that is known as the gap market, where people are considered to be earning too little for adequate home loans, but also earning too much for adequate housing subsidies. So previously, FLISP enabled qualifying beneficiaries to reduce the initial home loan amount or make up for the shortfall between the qualifying loan and the total house price. So FLISP works on a sliding scale that we will get into just in a bit. And FLISP will either give you monies to go towards transfer costs and transfer fees, or they will give you money that goes onto the bond, and that will reduce your monthly bond repayments. Please note that FLISP works with your affordability. If you qualify for 600,000 but you see a house for 900,000, please understand that unless you have that 300,000 in cash, that money will not come from FLISP. FLISP will only give you the money that is going to help you with your affordability in terms of the home loan that you can afford. Okay, so let's just make that very clear. So in April 2022, the criteria changed. Instead of just looking at the typical home loan route, FLISP also now supports non-mortgage housing facilities, as mentioned, like the pension and provident housing loans, stokvels, rent to buy, installment agreement sales. So let's say you go and you sign a rent to buy lease. FLISP will help you when it comes to the time after you have rented for a while and it's time to officially pay the balance of what this house is valued at. If you're going to use a pension or provident housing loan, FLISP will also support you in that endeavor. So let's look at the criteria of First Home Finance or FLISP and who can apply. You must be a South African citizen, born in South Africa. If you were not born in South Africa, you must have a permanent residency permit that now says you are a citizen of the country. You have to be legally competent to enter into a contract, and you must be 18 years or older. The applicant must have a financial dependent. A bit of explanation on that. This can either be a minor child, does not have to be your child, but it has to then be a child you are responsible for financially. This can be an elderly person who can no longer work. This can be a person with a disability that prevents them from working, or it can be a person with an illness that prevents them from working. Just to be clear, a financial dependent being someone who can work, who is not ill or disabled, but unfortunately in this economy cannot find work or does not want to find work, they will not qualify as your financial dependent. There has to be a valid reason outside of cannot finding work or not wanting to find work. It has to be a minor, an elderly person, a disabled person, or an ill person. That is the only way they will qualify as a financial dependent. The next point will be the applicant or spouse has not previously received a housing subsidy from government. So if you or your spouse has previously benefited from a housing subsidy from government, you will not qualify for FLISP. The applicant or spouse, before we move on to that, also who has not previously received or benefited from a housing subsidy, please note that if you have a minor who is going to live with you in a house that you have used FLISP to pay for, when that minor child grows up and wants to buy their own home, they may not then use FLISP because they've already benefited from FLISP. So just to be clear on that, applicant or spouse has not previously owned a home. If you marry someone who's already owned a home, they live in that home, and now you marry them in community of property, please note that the Department of Human Settlements will then say you do not qualify because technically you do now own a home. So if there is, let's say, a divorce, you are entitled to asking for half of that home's value, and this is why you will not qualify for FLISP. So if you're married in community of property, you do not qualify. If you inherit a property, you do not qualify. If a property has been donated or gifted to you, you do not qualify. So these are just the points that you need to take into consideration. And then as an applicant, your gross monthly income must be between the brackets that you see below, 3,501 Rand and 22,000 Rand per month gross monthly income. Also, on that note, please note that if you are looking to buy the house and live with your spouse, FLISP will not just take your income into consideration. So let's say your income is 20,000. They will take into consideration the entire household income. So you are buying the house, you are going to put the house on your name, you make an income of, let's say, 20,000, but then your spouse makes an income of maybe 3,000. Their income will also be taken into consideration because as a partnership, you make up the household. Okay? If you and your spouse or your partner are within the bracket, but you have a child over 18 or a cousin or a friend who will be part of your household, their income will be taken into consideration as well. So these are points that you need to be aware of. And then once again, just to go back on it, I do get these queries a lot. If you are married in community of property, you will not qualify. If you've inherited a house, you will not qualify. If the house has been donated or gifted to you, you will not qualify. Even if you inherit a house with 20 other siblings, you will not qualify. Okay, so let's take a look at what first home finance or FLISP can be used for, and that can obviously be used to buy a house. Traditionally, that is what most people do, but you can also buy a housing stand. So in other words, a plot or an earth, that is a housing stand, and you can build a house on that stand. But here are some points that you need to take into special consideration. The construction company that you use to build the house on that stand has to be enrolled with the National Housing and Building Council. Okay? The building contractor that you use must be registered with this council and must be a registered builder with this council. You may not use someone that you know who is not registered. FLISP will not pay for the construction. It will be to pay for the costs of buying a house. In other words, conveyancing fees, transfer fees, or deposit. We will look at the sliding scale soon. Can the beneficiary request a first home finance guarantee certificate before they approach a lender? In other words, a bank, someone who's going to give you a home loan. And yes, you can. Ordinarily, an applicant will first approach a lender for a housing loan, but they may also request a FLISP guarantee certificate from the Department of Human Settlements before they approach a lender. Guys, this is important. You absolutely need to get that FLISP approval letter or that FLISP guarantee certificate. So the FLISP guarantee certificate pertains to the building, and that is just a certificate that guarantees that if your builder is registered with the council, then FLISP will be covering your building costs. Okay? The FLISP approval letter is something else. That is the approval letter that says this is the FLISP subsidy you qualify for. Make sure you get these things in place. These two pieces of paper are very, very important. Your FLISP approval letter is very important. Always get one. And if you are going to build on a housing stand using a registered builder with the council, then please get your FLISP guarantee letter. That is absolutely important. Don't ever miss out on that. So as I mentioned earlier, this is the subsidy table. You can take your time to look through that, and these are just the salary bands and the FLISP amount that you qualify for. The more you earn, the smaller the subsidy, and vice versa. So the less you earn, the bigger the subsidy. So the smaller subsidies normally go to costs of buying a house, like conveyancing costs, transfer costs, and such, and the bigger amounts will go onto your bond. Please note that FLISP will never pay money into your pocket. A lot of people expect that the FLISP money gets paid into their pocket. FLISP does not pay money into your pocket. They pay it straight to the service providers or the bank, depending on what your subsidy is going to cover. So please, please, please take that into consideration. Hence, FLISP will not give you money for a house that you've already purchased, because that's done. Those costs are paid. You are now paying your monthly installments. And so where's FLISP going to put that money? They will not give it to you. They will give it to service providers and to banks. Okay, so what if the qualifying subsidy amount exceeds the amount due on the property? The beneficiary, that would be you, is then entitled to the balance of the amount, subject to using it for housing purposes. So FLISP is not going to give you this money so that you can go buy clothes or buy luxuries or go out for the day. You need to use this money on housing purposes. If there's extra money left over from FLISP, you will then need to use it for housing purposes, like maybe fixing a crack in the wall or replacing windows and such. It has to be for the purpose of the house. So what if the qualifying subsidy amount is not enough to cover the initial buying requirements? Example, transferring fees, transferring attorneys and such. The beneficiary may be required to pay the difference from personal or other resources. So if the money is not enough, FLISP or First Home Finance is going to request that you make up for that money from your personal funds, your savings, whether or not you're going to sell something to make up for that cost, but that money is going to have to come from you. So may First Home Finance funds be paid directly to any beneficiary or seller? Only the following may be paid directly. FLISP will only pay directly to the bank, directly to the registered building contractor, directly to the conveyancing attorneys, and only into a trust account. So usually conveyancing attorneys have to open trust accounts whenever people do transactions with them. The relevant supplier, applicable only for any surplus funds resulting from the subsidy amount exceeding the amount owing on the property, is used for an approved housing related purpose. So once again, if there are extra funds, if you need to put in new tiles or you need to fix the plumbing, it must be something to do with the property that you have bought. The relevant municipality/human settlements department, applicable for cases where FLISP is used to acquire a housing stand or a house in an approved RDP project. Such income may only be used for national housing programs. Guys, to put it into simple terms, FLISP is only to do with buying a house and then spending money on that house. You cannot use FLISP for anything else. Alright, FLISP pre-approval. This is very, very important. These are the documents that are needed for your FLISP pre-approval. Your SAID or permanent residency permit, 3 months bank statements, 6 if self-employed, 3 months pay slips, power of attorney form from your bond originator. Bond originator you will find on my WhatsApp channel, link in my profile. It takes 24 to 48 hours for your pre-approval certificate. Please note, intend to apply for a home loan together with First Home Finance. So please, you cannot use FLISP if you need a home loan but you don't get the home loan. You cannot use FLISP if you don't qualify for the home loan. FLISP is not there to buy the house for you. FLISP is just to help with the costs. So you need to have an intention that you're going to apply for the home loan when you apply for FLISP. They need to be applied for together. Okay, so let's look at the application process. Once you find the house that interests you, you need to do the usual, put in an offer to purchase. You need to have your pre-approval letter attached. Your bond will then be approved in principle. And once that's done, your First Home Finance form will be stamped by the Commissioner of Oaths. The documents that will be provided on the list is what you will need as part of your application process. Once you apply for FHF, it takes about 21 working days. Guys, it's important to understand that this process can be a lengthy one just in getting your FLISP subsidy to be applied to your home purchase. All checks will be done, including checking on your dependents and whether or not they qualify as dependents, and looking at your previous grants that you would have had, income grants, and checking if you haven't already benefited from a subsidy. Okay, so taking a look at your documentary requirements, you will need your FLISP or First Home Finance application form, your identity document of every adult member for the household, because remember I said household income is considered, and they want to make sure that no one is living in the house who is unemployed, who is unable to find work, or simply just not wanting to find work. Birth certificates with the identity number for every minor member of the household that does not have an ID document. And then we need the proof of South African citizenship. Of course, if you are born in South Africa, it will say citizen on your ID. Your marriage certificate, affidavit for any union solemnized in terms of the customary law. So if you are in a customary marriage, divorce settlement agreement, basically to prove custodianship, court order or order issued by the Commissioner of Child Welfare to prove guardianship. You can't just pick up anyone's child off the street and say that they are dependent on you. Proof of sources of income. If you earn a salary, but you also have a side hustle, please make sure that that income is declared. And so if you want to use that within your affordability in terms of getting a home loan, make sure that that income is declared. Make sure you have a track record of business expenses and income as well. Your government issued documents like your ID, birth certificates, marriage certificate and stuff needs to be stamped by the Commissioner of Oaths, and you guys, you need to do this yourself. I get a lot of people who are concerned over the fact that they've paid someone to do their FLISP application. Guys, there's only so much that someone else can do for you. Everything else needs to be done by you in any case. And so this is why I'm putting together this video, so that you can fully understand the process from beginning to end, because it is best to just do it on your own. It's best to have all the information and do it for yourself instead of going and paying people. Half the time people get scammed. I'm not saying that everybody out there is scamming. There are legitimate bond origination companies who charge between 1.2 and 1.5 to get your application done for you, and they are legitimate. But most cases that I've seen, they've just found some agent or some person to do it for them, and they have not been successful in acquiring any FLISP subsidy. So guys, all of the documents that need to be stamped by the Commissioner of Oaths, it needs to be done by you in person in any case. So you might as well do all the other steps yourself, save yourself a buck, and also get familiar with the process. Maybe you can help someone else in future. Okay, so let's do a deep dive on the allocation of funds. So as you can see in scenario 1, the person's income is 16,500. Remember that your bond is calculated on 30% of your income. It can be no more than 30%. So this person can afford to pay 4,950 Rand on a bond. And then they get their FLISP amount as well. So their bond on 4,950 will be a bond of 470,000. The FLISP amount on 16,500, they'll get 54,000 from FLISP. So as you can see, total available, that's all the funds they have altogether, and that would be the purchase price. And let's say there's costs of 50,000. So this is how FLISP would assist. This 54,000 would go to the costs of buying a home. So let's take a look at scenario 2, bit of a lower income, 5,000. 30% of that 5,000 would be an affordability of 1,500. And on that affordability, they qualify for a home loan of 142,958. The FLISP amount they get on their income would be 114,341. So total available, that's the amount they have altogether. The purchase cost is 220, and the costs would be 35,000. So basically, what would happen in scenario 2 is that 114,000 will go onto the bond amount. So that will help to lower bond repayments, and then costs will be covered by the buyer. As in scenario 1, the 54,000, that 54,000 would likely just go to conveyancing fees, transfer fees, and things like that. So the higher the salary, the lower the subsidy. That means that subsidy will cover costs. The lower the salary, the higher the subsidy. That means that the subsidy will go towards reducing the bond repayments. So all normal credit checks and guidelines will apply. Personal loans and credit to be avoided. Savings can be used to supplement your purchase. Guys, personal loans and credit while you are trying to get a home loan or trying to get your FLISP, please, that's why it says to be avoided. Avoid doing that, because within this process, if you start going and making unnecessary debt, the bank and FLISP is not going to like that, because it's going to affect your affordability, which means that, let's say on that 16.5, you can no longer afford 4,950. Because we cannot take more than 30% of your income, but we also need to consider your expenses as well. So if you go and you up your expenses, you're not going to qualify for that bond. So please be careful when you are in the process of getting a home loan and in the process of acquiring FLISP. If you go and you make unnecessary debt, then that is definitely going to affect your chances of being approved. Okay, so let's understand the application process. Please understand that you need to get pre-approved. Your affordability and your credit score are equally important. You will go through the normal offer to purchase and home loan application, your bond approval in principle, plus your FHF forms and documents, your FHF approval, and then final bank grant needs to be accepted, and then your application and your home buying process can be successful. So first home finance and bank approval goes hand in hand. You need both. You need to get approved for a home loan from a financial lender like a bank, and you need to get pre-approved for your first home finance subsidy, because you need to know your affordability when you are shopping for a home. You need to know how much of a bond you can get. You need to know how much FLISP is going to cover whether they are going to put money on the bond or pay for your transfer costs. So please understand that they are both important. You need both, and you need to take it very seriously when it comes to managing finances in terms of your affordability and keeping your credit score healthy. Okay, so that was my run through of FLISP or First Home Finance, and helping you understand how the process works, how it all comes together, how your affordability, credit score, your bond pre-approval, and your FLISP pre-approval is important. Please go through this video as much as you need. And I hope that this video has helped. If you do have any questions, you can leave them on this video. I'd be happy to answer them. I'd be also happy to, if requested, to do a live session with everybody who's been able to watch this video, just to run through things with you on a personal level. So thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you very much for using the subscription platform on my TikTok channel, the TikTok profile, and being able to have an in-depth look at FLISP or First Home Finance. Thank you very much for joining. Any questions in the comment section? I'm willing to do an exclusive live with anyone who's been able to watch this video. I hope it helps. I really do want everyone to understand how this process works, keep people from getting scammed, and keep people from missing out on using FLISP.